All right, we are officially on the clock. Good afternoon, streamers. Welcome to the first official mock draft here on CBS Sports HQ. Amanda Guerra, Brady Quinn, Ryan Wilson, Danny Kanell. It's like a breath having all four of us on here. I like that animation. It was good, right?
Very cool.
It was cute. Okay, so the Super Bowl hangover is in full effect. We are now more than 200 days officially until the NFL season returns. But we have the combine, we have the draft, everything just around the corner. So we are going to go through. Ryan Wilson is now up on CBS Sports HQ, or CBSSports.com, I should say, your entire draft.
Yeah, this is probably mock draft 20-something. I started in September, the beginning of the college football season. And now that the NFL season is officially over, Pete and Danny and Brady can yell at me weekly about the picks they truly and utterly hate.
All right, so it'll be fun here. We're going to start easy. We'll go easy, then we'll get a little bit difficult. So let's start with number one. Hands down, it has to be Joe Burrow, right?
Yes, I'm hesitating because it's the Bengals, and sometimes the Bengals do Bengals things. Zach Taylor and the staff were in Mobile with Justin Herbert that entire week. And you guys heard Carson Palmer's comments last week where he said, I wouldn't suggest going to the Bengals because that's an organization that doesn't want to win. And oh, by the way, my brother Jordan trains Joe Burrow. So yeah, Joe Burrow's a layup. I think it makes a ton of sense. I don't even think the Bengals can mess this up.
I think they could if they trade out of the pick. You know, that's kind of the wild card of all this. And if you want to connect the dots, and maybe you look at Matt Rule hiring Joe Brady as the offensive coordinator in Carolina, they are in the top 10. Maybe they would want to mortgage their future for Joe Burrow to keep the continuity of both him and Joe Brady together. Look, that seems pretty far-fetched, but you never say never in the NFL, Danny. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but it would make sense to keep those two together.
I think you have to consider, too, that David Tepper is one of the more aggressive owners, might say, hey, I'm making a risk. I don't think it's risky, but I'm going with a college coach, give him a nice, hefty deal. Then you bring in Joe Brady, as you mentioned. Maybe he's saying, hey, let's get our group here and let's build around him. Let's be patient with him for the next 6-7 years and see if we can build something special. But I think when you referenced connect the dots, I was also thinking Joe Burrow's from Ohio. And the Bengals, how bad would that play out with the fan base? Because even Ohio State fans still love Joe Burrow because of the time he spent as a Buckeye, and they were actually rooting for him there. So I think you would really disenfranchise a lot of a fan base, which needs to feel some love right now at this point, of their franchise, because they have not had much success as of late.
No, they haven't. Look at Andy Dalton's stoner contract. I mean, they have to figure out what to do with him. He's not going to be hanging around. They'll clearly move on from him if that was the case. The only other thing I wonder is because the Bengals were coaching the Senior Bowl, Ryan, you were down there. Justin Herbert had some rave reviews during his time there. We know how big sometimes the Senior Bowl can play in the back of these minds of the decision makers for these picks.
He looked great, and that's one of the first things I told you last week when I saw you, Brady, when I got back. Because going into the season, we've talked about this for weeks, Justin Herbert didn't have a great senior season at Oregon, much better than the year before in 2018, but there were still the ups and downs. But he went to the Senior Bowl, and Danny, you were the Senior Bowl. The workouts, the 3 practices went off without a hitch. Coaches were raving about him. Then he played well in the game. He won the MVP after one quarter's work. No blitzing in the Senior Bowl, so there's some things you have to consider. But so you see that guy up close and personal, and I would imagine that affects your opinion when you're going to draft a guy.
It absolutely is. You develop a relationship. It's an opportunity. There was some speculation, although I thought it was pretty crazy to say that Joe Burrow needed to play in the Senior Bowl, but that he would maybe get a head start in the offense.
Right.
That's where Justin Herbert, you get him in there, see can he handle an NFL offense, and it's a very limited installation of what the plays they're going to be running, but you get a feel for somebody's personality, and I knew that as soon as people got to see Justin Herbert throw the ball, they would fall in love with him because he's got a cannon. Right. I don't think that translates into automatic success, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Bengals started to like him. But still, I just think it's a lock that Burrow's going to be a Bengal.
I think at this point, if you're the Bengals, you are trying to convince yourself why not to take Joe Burrow. That is the process that you're in right now. And so if you're asking yourself that question, the biggest question you have to answer is why did he take such a big jump, such a big leap from where he was 2 years ago to this past season, winning the Heisman, winning the national championship. And the only thing you can really point to is potentially the addition of Joe Brady, because he wasn't there 2 years ago as their passing game coordinator, but potentially the maturation of the entire group, the pass catchers as well as the offensive line that was voted the best in college football. So, that's really the only thing you can point to is maybe reasons why you'd say, all right, was it him or was it Joe Brady or was it the sum of all the pieces together that helped him take this leap? Because if you're Cincinnati, you're saying, maybe we don't have those pieces. Maybe we don't feel like he'll be the same player if he comes here. And maybe they look at someone like Justin Herbert that, he had a good, experienced offensive line. Not quite as many playmakers on the outside of him. I know his year was a little bit up and down, but he also statistically put up a pretty good year and capped it off nicely, too, with a nice bowl win. So, if you have both those two players, close in comparison with one another, maybe you do entertain some potential trade talk, moving back, getting more picks to help out Herbert or whoever you would end up taking with that draft pick. But that's the position that I think Cincinnati's in right now. I think they have to take him. They're just trying to figure out why they shouldn't take him if that's the case.
All right, just really quickly, and Ryan, you can answer this. If someone were to trade up, the Panthers, what would they have to present to Cincinnati to get?
Well, it's funny Brady mentions the Panthers because he and Pete were double teaming me a few weeks ago. Because here's the trade scenario that I talked about from 7 to 1. You talk about
I didn't say the trade scenario was bad. I just think it's a lot to give up.
a whole lot. So, Danny, I'll throw it to you because Brady's heard this, and I don't know, maybe he changed his mind. So, number 7 is where the Panthers are. They've given up their first-round pick this year, their second and their third, and then a first-rounder the next 2 years to go from 7 to 1.
That's quite a haul right there. But I think that's the type of offer you would have to give to the Bengals to say, you know what, we're going to give you an offer you can't refuse.
Right.
And then you would have to listen if you're the Bengals, and then you would be talked out of them. I wonder, too, if there's a player scenario in there.
Right.
That the Panthers throw in maybe, like, is it Christian
Cam
McCaffrey?
Newton?
Cam Newton and McCaffrey.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
because McCaffrey,
Wow.
running back, well, I'll ask our guy Pete Prisco. Like, he would say, hey, you don't want to have to pay Christian McCaffrey. Why not trade him ahead of time before you have to? So, I think all of this is, I don't want to say reckless speculation because I appreciate both of your guys' opinions.
Thank you.
But I do think it's a little far-fetched that he gets moved.
Burrow did go down to the Senior Bowl for a day or so, right? And he did he go to pick up the playbook from the Bengals? Is that what it was?
Might have been.
All right, let's move on to number 2, Joe Burrow there at number 1. Unless something crazy happens, we'll find out. Let's go hands down, same thing. I feel like the top 2 are a lock with Joe Burrow and then Chase Young right behind him, right, Ryan?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think there's a much more likely case that the Redskins will answer the phone should the team want to trade up for Chase Young. But I think Chase Young has the same type of talent as the Bosa brothers. He could be that type of impact player immediately. And you talk to some people that think he could be better than the Bosas. We know Nick just won Rookie of the Year on the defense. I think he had 9 sacks. He played pretty well in the Super Bowl that we're rewatching now. So if you're the Redskins, do you need an edge rusher more than anything else? Not necessarily, but he is so good, I don't think you pass on him.
See, I would make the case you need 2. And you got Sweat on one side, to have Young on the other. Yeah, then much like the 49ers, who we saw get to a Super Bowl, bringing in Dee Ford, and then obviously drafting Nick Bosa. So that combination would make a lot of sense to me. You already have your young quarterback in Dwayne Haskins. They've got the ability to run the football. McLaurin is a nice option on the outside. But, and this is a draft where you can get wide receivers at latter parts in the draft. To me, I think Chase Young can immediately come in, impact your team, and help improve that defense as Dwayne Haskins continues to grow. So it makes all the sense in the world. I would not trade out of this pick in hopes of getting a prospect that's going to impact your team right away like Chase Young will.
I think 1 and 2 with Burrow to the Bengals and Chase Young to the Redskins is a virtual lock. I do not think either of these teams would be foolish enough to pass up from him because I do feel like there's never such thing as a lock as far as a player's production at the next level, but these guys fit. You can check off a lot of the boxes as far as what you're looking for, and Chase Young is the example on the defensive side of the ball. He's going to impress at the combine. He's a physical specimen. His production was off the charts. I know there was a little bit of a drop-off at the tail end of the season in the championship game against Michigan, but you saw teams starting to game plan specifically for him. Saw a lot of double teams, a lot of chips, a lot of games that were specifically designed to slow him down. In the NFL, teams don't have that luxury because there's so much talent around you. Even if it's not a very good team, you just can't do that. So I think he will translate, and I think it's an automatic for the Redskins.
All right. Sorry, I thought you were going to respond there for a second. Okay, so let's go. That was 1 and 2 there. Let's go 3 through 10. We're going to touch on the quarterbacks. We talked about Justin Herbert for a little bit. But Ryan, kind of take us through 3 through 10.
Yeah, so 3, I have Jeffrey Okudah, the cornerback out of Ohio State. Look, they might be in the quarterback business too, so we'll see what happens there, but he's the best cornerback in this draft. Jedrick Wills is the right tackle out of Alabama. He goes to New York to help Daniel Jones quit fumbling the ball, and then there's some guy named Tua Tagovailoa at number 5, who we saw at Radio Row all week, and he is convinced that he will be able to throw the ball in late March, early April ahead of the draft. So we'll see what happens there.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Tua. How do you guys feel with him going number 5 for the Dolphins? I know Will Brinson even said they may trade up to 3 for Tua just in order to get him there. How do you guys feel about all of that?
I mean, it feels like this has been destiny for a couple years now, as it was tank for Tua was the Miami Dolphins kind of, unofficial motto for the last couple seasons. And it feels like Stephen Ross as an owner might even want this to happen more so than not. This is a franchise that's been desperate to find a replacement for Dan Marino for, close to 15, 20 years now. and it does seem like it's there. I'm concerned about it. I think this is the big, and I told you this before, Ryan, I think this is the biggest risk-reward quarterback that we've seen probably in a decade as far as the risk of can he stay healthy. And I think it's a very reasonable question to ask when you look at this amount of surgeries, the amount of time that he's had to miss, and the significance of this hip injury. So if he's healthy, yeah, I think he translates. He's got a great arm. He's got the intangibles, the leadership, the IQ, but can he stay on the field? I think it's a valid question.
It's a valid question, and one that you're really going to have to feel confident in your medical staff and your evaluation and watching film to see if you feel confident enough that he will be able to, but also, what about the offensive line? You know, you've got a guy going to the top 5 from their offensive line. I mean, he plays behind one of the better offensive lines, and he couldn't stay healthy. That's a concern if you're going to the Miami Dolphins that don't have as good of an offensive line. So that's the first thing I'd say. And another thing is, he's surrounded by talent at Alabama.
Yeah.
They're not going to have the same sorts of playmakers. Davante Parker had a great year, but outside of Parker, I mean, who do you really feel like you can rely on within this offense? So he's going to a situation where he's going to have to raise and elevate the level of play everyone else had around him. And that's a big question mark considering the injuries he's going to be coming off of and considering where he came from. Because I don't want to say that we haven't seen him do it, but he really had to just kind of facilitate the offense and the playmakers that were there. He didn't have that necessarily be like a Joe Burrow to help raise the level of everyone else, or Lamar Jackson, who we saw really raise the level of everyone else. So that's going to be another question I think if you're Miami you have to contemplate. But he makes the most sense. I mean, I think when you look at him, he's the second best quarterback on tape that you're going to watch in this draft class. And if that's the position you want to go after and you want to ensure that you're going to get that spot, you're going to have to trade up to 3 to get it.
It's been one of my favorite, and I'll be curious to hear what you think about this too, because my favorite thing to do is put on the toughest opponents. Because if you play at Alabama, if you play at Clemson, you're going to be significantly better than the other team 9-10 weeks out of the season. So put in the toughest tape. Deshaun Watson against Alabama was incredible in back-to-back championships games. That's why I loved him coming out. Joe Burrow, put him against any opponent, whatever defense it was, and he was off the charts. If you put in the tape of Tua against Clemson in last year's championship game, against Georgia in the SEC championship game, there's some cause for concern there about how he did against the top-tier talent, which I think is exactly what Brady's talking about.
Yeah. What would cause the Dolphins not to take him? Like if he showed, because he said he wants to go to the combine, he wants to perform there. I mean, if he only performs, on average, or do you think there's another team where he would be a better fit, or you think it's Dolphins hands down?
I think it's medical.
It's medical,
yeah. He may not do, I don't know what he's going to do at the combine. He'll talk to people. I don't know if he's going to try to work out. I think it'll be probably, and you guys know better than me, something scripted on his own at his pro day, whenever that happens to be, and it's just about being healthy.
You do not want to put him in a situation where there's going to be variables introduced, meaning if I drop back, I have to react. He's not going to be far enough along in his rehab process to do anything other than a true scripted deal, 3-step, 5-step, 7-step drops, whatever it is from gun, play action, but everything where you can anticipate what's going to happen and just showcase that you're on the right path in your rehabilitation to be able to come back and potentially play in your rookie year. You start introducing things where he's got to react or he's got to move around or do something funky and that hip isn't quite right, that's where there's even just the potential of re-injuring it just in this process.
I think, too, the Dolphins are in a good spot where they don't have to rush him if they keep Ryan Fitzpatrick, who's a pretty good option as a guy who's been around a lot of football. The locker room likes him. I think he would be a good mentor for Tua. I don't think there would be any tension between, hey, I'm supposed to be the starter. None of that. So I think it actually is a good landing spot for Tua where they could slowly ease him in and make sure he's 100% before he comes back.
He gets like $8 million to come back and essentially maybe be the starter for a period of time and help bring him along. So it seems like a good deal. You definitely want to come back for that.
All right, let's go to Justin Herbert going to the Chargers at 6, Ryan. That's where you have him. You said he had a really strong showing at the Senior Bowl, correct?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I think he's a second-round pick based on the way he played the last 2 years, but it's hard to find franchise quarterbacks who are 6'6", 235, can throw the ball 5 miles, so there's a reason that NFL teams like him. And recency effect, what I saw most recently will stick in your mind, and he was off the charts good at the Senior Bowl. The Chargers need a quarterback. It looks like Phillip Rivers is done. They just gave Anthony Lynn, their head coach, a new deal to show signs of some stability there at that organization where they still play in a soccer stadium, but whatever. But I feel like Herbert has a chance to be good. It's going to take time. I talked to him at the Senior Bowl, and I said, what do NFL teams want to see from you? And he didn't say anything about throwing the ball well or his footwork. It was, I need to show them that I can be a leader, and I think that's what he's had to prove throughout his career at Oregon, and he's going to have to continue to do so when he ends up in the NFL.
Look, he's got to improve upon his touch passes, and I'll just kick this to you, Danny. Do you think that's something that you can improve upon this late in your career? Because I haven't seen many guys who've been able to develop that talent at this point. Usually they kind of are what they are, and it's going to be the situation and circumstance they enter into that's either going to accentuate what they can do or be their demise.
I'm 100% on board with you. I think there are natural throwers of the football, and I think it affects a couple things. One, your ability to be accurate. Like, can you hit guys in stride? Can you place it in a tight window? And if you see struggles with that in college, you're going to hear a lot of players come out and say, well, yeah, my mechanics, I can get better. My fundamentals, I can work on those. And no, there's a natural innate ability just to throw the football. And part of that is working different trajectories and working different velocities. And if that's something you haven't seen there, it's not something you develop this late in the game. So I think that's a cause for concern too. There's also, and I think there's some similarities if he does go to LA and he's playing in the same town as Jared Goff. You saw Goff struggle his rookie year going from, a predominantly shotgun offense, and it was different, but the system that Herbert's been running to Oregon is not NFL friendly. It's not like it's going to be an easy transition for him. So wherever he goes, if it is the Chargers, it's going to be a process. I would not expect him to come in and just flourish like we've seen some of these quarterbacks come in recently. Baker's, rookie, incredible year. Then we just saw Kyler, rookie of the year. I think it'll be more of a process for Herbert.
The good thing, though, is just from watching his film and all that, I don't think the offense at Oregon really accentuated anything he does. I think he could have been a better system for him to have more productivity, maybe to look better on film. But the way I'd summarize him right now is he's a thrower. He's not a passer of the football. And that's going to be the biggest difference is he's going to have to learn how to shape throws and really pass, and that encompasses a lot more touch. He's got all the raw talent ability. He reminds me of Ryan Tannehill. When Tannehill came out of Texas A&M, big kid, athletic, and I think he has the time to be able to develop into what we saw from Tannehill this year. But it might take that many years in the league until we really see what Justin Herbert's capable of. But also, again, situation, circumstance he enters into, the roster around him, that offensive system, that's going to be paramount to anything else.
All right, we've taken a look at 1 through 10 for the most part, so we are just getting started here. Stick around because we are going to go 11 to 20. By the way, you've noticed we haven't seen any wide receivers yet. There are 6 coming up. Where do the top 2 land? We'll find out. All right, welcome back to CBS Sports HQ. We are going through our first official of many, of course, mock drafts here. All thanks to the guy, you see his name up there, Ryan Wilson. You can find the full list on CBSSports.com. So we're going to take a look right now at 11 through 20. Ryan, quickly take us through because I can't wait to get started because I happen to know you and Danny are disagreeing a little bit here.
Oh, good. I didn't know that. Can't wait. Oh, yeah. So Isaiah Simmons, number 11 to the Jets. They have other needs, but he is one of the most versatile defenders in this draft class. Jerry Jeudy goes number 12 to the Raiders. Best route runner in this draft class. Didn't have a fantastic year because he plays with so many first-round picks in Alabama. Still very, very good. CeeDee Lamb is to the Colts. He'll be a weapon for Jacoby Brissett. He is the strongest player, in my opinion, pound for pound of anyone in this draft class at wide receiver. Jordan Love at 14 is the new quarterback for the Buccaneers and Bruce Arians. Christian Fulton, who played at LSU in that championship team, had a slightly better year last year, but still a first-round talent, goes to Denver. Clavon Chason had a fantastic last 6-7 games of the year, is a guy off the edge. He probably needs to gain a few pounds, but explosive. The Cowboys get their safety in Xavier McKinney out of Alabama. Terrell Lewis, also another guy who had a great Senior Bowl, came in at 259 and looked to be 259. Patrick Queen, the LSU linebacker.
What does that mean? What does that mean? What does 259 look like, Ryan?
It was 6'5", 259.
That looks good then.
I was impressed. I hadn't seen that in person, Brady. And
much different than 5'10", 259, right? There's a big difference between the two.
That's right. See, Amanda said go quickly. And
we're going off the rails already. We're only at 11 through 20. Okay, I want to start with Isaiah Simmons because if I am not mistaken, to Danny, did you have him going much higher initially?
I had him going a little bit higher, but I think I love him as a player coming out of Clemson. I think he's versatile. I think he's a player who can match up in a lot of different spots. He's tall, he's lanky. To me, he's built for today's NFL with spread offenses that are going to make you run sideline to sideline, put you in mismatches and try to find those, tight ends that can run. He can match up with the best of them. So I would have him going a little bit higher, but I think he's a steal here for the Jets if he does drop to 11.
See, I think he's definitely one of the top prospects. I would say he's top 4, top 3 in this year's draft. One of the reasons why he could go in the spot is because a team doesn't know where to put him, or they just had a greater need. He's incredibly versatile, you're right. The biggest question becomes, where does he play? Does he end up playing that hybrid safety that's in the box and you move him around, do different things? That's only going to be valued if you've got a defensive coordinator or a head coach who's defensive-minded that would want to put him in those positions and really thinks that can be a big asset. Now, Greg Williams for the New York Jets, they could definitely use him, and they could figure out where to plug him in along with Jamal Adams. And I think our minds just start to imagine the different possibilities of those two playing together. So could make a lot of sense there. Love him as a prospect, but there's definitely the chance that sometimes you kind of get stuck in that role where they don't really know how to identify you, how to use you, and you end up dropping a little bit in the draft for that reason.
All right, somebody who was a top prospect, one of our top prospects coming into 2019 was Jerry Jeudy. He had a good year, not necessarily a great year. You like him at 12 to the Raiders. Tell us why.
I mean, they need playmakers down the field. They drafted Hunter Renfrow, who's a great slot guy. They had Darren Waller, who had a fantastic year at tight end. Is Derek Carr going to be the quarterback next year? We don't know. We know that John Gruden loves having the ball matriculated down the field, if you will, and Jerry Jeudy is really good at doing that. They have 3 first-round picks at wide receiver. Davante Smith is coming back to school, but Henry Ruggs will also likely be a first-rounder. Jerry Jeudy, as I mentioned, is the best route runner in this draft class.
Whether it's Brady or Carr, I mean, you're going to be needing help on the outside. That's the biggest thing. I mean, Waller can't lead you in receiving again. Terrell Williams, he's a good complement to whoever the number one's going to be, but Jeudy could make a lot of sense.
Are you going Tom Brady the Raiders? Did you just make that call right here?
No.
You're leaving that door open, though. I just like it.
I mean, he did it so quietly. He just kind of slid that in there.
Whatever the rumor is, whatever ends up happening, I'm just saying they need help with the wide receiver spot. And I'm sure if they were having those conversations with Tom amongst a contract and what he'd signed, it'd also be, hey, I just came from a situation where I didn't have much to work with. You got to draft something. You got to bring in something more in free agency.
I think, too, that why I like this pick for the Raiders specifically and where maybe you could picture it happening is that Mike Mayock and John Gruden have very clearly they like players that come from championship-type programs. They took Josh Jacobs last year from Alabama. They had a bunch of Clemson players. They
basically took the entire national championship.
Exactly. I saw you had Caleb Von Chason going later to them, another player. Like, I could absolutely envision them going to this spot. And to Brady's point, too, they do need another weapon on the outside to give whoever's playing quarterback an opportunity.
All right, somebody who is coming from not a championship team, I say this begrudgingly, that would be CeeDee Lamb. We still love him, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
You're Big 12 champs. You got that going for you.
All right, you have him 13 to the Colts. They have a need on defense, so why do you like CeeDee Lamb here, Ryan?
I go back and forth about whether Jerry Jeudy or CeeDee Lamb is my wide receiver one. And here's the thing. You talk to some folks in the league, and I did that while at the Senior Bowl. In the Big 12, and you guys know this, you're not playing against anyone defensively. They're not up in your face. You're not seeing a lot of press man. He was fantastic. He does so many things really well. But how does that translate in year one when you're going to the NFL against bigger, stronger, faster cornerbacks? It's going to take some time to adjust. I love him. I think he does a lot of things well. I don't think he's going to run particularly well at the combine. He may run a 4.5, but he's not going to be lights out fast. That said, half a dozen to one when you're comparing Jeudy and Lamb. They do different things, but they both do them pretty well.
1A and 1B probably,
yeah.
Wide receiver spot, at least in my opinion, based on what we've seen. The thing I like about him, though, is kind of ran a greater variety of routes just because he was by far and away their best wide receiver this year at Oklahoma. So he's got that working for him in his transition to the NFL. I think the bigger question for the Colts taking him at 13 is Jacoby Brissett your guy? Or is there a quarterback there that you would potentially look at taking and feel like you want to build on for the future? You took Paris Campbell last year. I think when he's healthy, matched up with some of the other pass catchers they have in Indy, I don't know that wide receiver is your biggest need. I would think best player available, maybe defense, or look at potentially a quarterback if you fall in love with one in this group.
All right. Did you have anything to add
about that? No, I was
just
going to say, if there's another quarterback that gets taken, and so then you'd be looking at, what would that be, 4 in the top 13?
Yeah.
It'd be crazy, but that's the trend we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years as teams overdraft. So makes it really interesting is who would that guy be that they potentially could fall in love with.
All right, let's go to another quarterback. 14, the Bucs, you have them taking Jordan Love. I know you said from the Senior Bowl that it was, he was okay. He was good, and then just kind of fell off toward the end of the week here.
Amanda, this is where I'm at with Ryan. Why is he trying to run off my guy Jameis Winston, who just had an incredible season, 5,000 yards passing, over 30 touchdowns. I'll just gloss over 30 interceptions right there. No, but I was just messing with you. But this could be an option.
I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they're going to do with the quarterback. We know that Bruce Arians can fix almost anything. And you mentioned the 30 touchdowns for Jameis, but he also threw the 30 interceptions. I don't know how happy Bruce Arians was about that. But Jordan Love, terrible 2019 season. I don't think there's any other way to put it. Played much better in 2018. I actually talked to Darwin Thompson, the Chiefs running back last week, and he said, I can tell you exactly why they were terrible. It's because everyone left. The coaching staff, the offensive line, the playmakers, including myself. And he said he has first-round type talent. And I didn't even say this, and we've heard this sort of mentioned in recent weeks and months. He said he is Patrick Mahomes in terms of the way he plays. I said, so he has as good an arm as Patrick Mahomes? He goes, no, he doesn't have that. But he did have a really good Senior Bowl. Again, we saw the explosiveness when the ball comes out of his hands, and he's mobile and all that. And, it just takes one team to fall in love with Jordan Love, and then he could be a top 15 pick.
And that's the biggest thing. It really only does take one team to fall in love with you to make that selection. And I think when you hear that, he compares or plays like Patrick Mahomes, okay, that makes some sense. But is he going to sit for a year then and learn from a guy in front of him like Patrick Mahomes did from Alex Smith? And is he going to deal with an offensive line like Andy Reid? Now, for the Tampa Bay Bucks, Bruce Arians with that offense, there's a lot to like there. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, all their playmakers, it could make a lot of sense if he has the time to develop and maybe sit and watch. Because I do think after watching his most recent film compared to 2 years ago, you could tell he were in lack of some playmakers, but there was also an issue with just processing. Once he got off that first read, he had a really hard time figuring out what to do with the second and third read. Really struggled versus the better opponents, in particular LSU this year, especially when there was pressure. So those are things that are only going to get worse when you get to the NFL, not better. So I think that's a little bit of my concern for him is you're not going to like the film so much. You're basing this on development and the raw intangibles or skills. And that's sometimes not necessarily a guy that's going to go in the first round.
I think this is that Jordan Love's going to be that player that everybody's going to love to try to find that dime in the rough. The guy who's, raw potential that, hey, and trust me, front offices like to feel this way too. Hey, we found the guy. We took a risk on him. We drafted him higher than most. And then look how well we did. That's a risky take, though, to try to go there. I do think it's interesting because if he does go to Tampa, and we all kind of agree, it's probably not going to be a step in and play right away and have success. Is Bruce Arians in for that type of project? Because by all accounts, it was, hey, he was going to go to Tampa. He has Jameis there. He's going to try to groom Byron Leftwich to be the next head coach. Now he's staying for another year. Is he going to be there for the next 3, 4, 5 years? Or does he, is he willing to kind of take a setback year with a rookie quarterback? So that's where I don't know if that's the best fit in Tampa Bay.
It also matters what happens with Jameis, right?
Right.
You franchise tag him. If that's the case, you really got to play him. So Jordan Love wouldn't be playing. Doesn't make much sense. If you can agree upon a longer-term deal with him, maybe Jameis takes that. And you don't necessarily have to play him because if things don't work out or you get off to a bad start, you put in Jordan Love if he's ready, and then you still have Winston under contract. You can trade him, get some assets back in return.
All right, Danny, you get to keep Jameis for getting Jordan Love.
For now.
Who else would you take at 14?
I don't know. I'd have to look at our list here of who we got. But, I mean, I would think it all depends. If you feel comfortable with Jameis, there's a lot of other needs on that Tampa team, as we've seen. And probably on the defensive side of the ball, they could get a little bit better because they have some talent on the offensive side. But I would say probably on the defensive side of the ball.
I would say potentially two best offensive linemen available. That's another group up front that could use a little bit of help. But to your point, if you're looking on defense, that's really the group that you could say whatever you want about Jameis Winston's stats this year and the amount of interceptions. They weren't all on him. But he also wasn't always put in the best position to succeed and play from out in front. There was times when he's in tight games and he's got to take those risks, those chances to be able to win or come from behind. There's going to be some interceptions that come along with it. So helping to improve their defense, best player available in this case, whether that's a secondary player or a rusher of some sort on the edge, those are also a couple things to consider.
All right, let's move on to the Dallas Cowboys. Did you see their odds, by the way, to win the Super Bowl next year?
They're actually pretty good.
But
did they go to the playoffs this year?
No.
Oh, okay. Which is why I said that they're actually pretty good next year.
I'm so confused. Okay, yeah, next year, apparently so. Things are going to change. All right, Cowboys, they need a defensive tackle. They need a defensive end. They need a corner. They also need a safety, and you like Xavier McKinney there. Tell us why.
Yeah, I love him. He's at Alabama, and earlier in the year, the conversation started with Grant Delpit, the safety out of LSU. Ankle injuries, didn't tackle anyone, so he had a tough. Well, that's
he did. He had a bad year.
Draft grade.
Yeah. So he's a first-round talent. We'll see if he sneaks into the first round. But McKinney had a really good year, and I feel like McKinney is actually a little more versatile. He plays a little closer to the line of scrimmage more often, but he can also play deep. And Amanda, you know that the Cowboys certainly need help in the secondary, and I think he makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, you look at the roster. I mean, they're pretty well set in other places if they can sign back some of the pieces that they have. Obviously, Dak Prescott being the first to discuss there. But he makes a lot of sense. He probably had the best season looking at a true safety, depending on how you view Isaiah Simmons and where he would fit into that category. But I just love his playmaking ability. If you look at some of the Dallas Cowboys struggles, at times they have a hard time getting turnovers. He got a sense of a ball hawk to me, really what Grant Delpit was 2 years ago. So it makes a lot of sense. I think you can go back and immediately improve the level of play of this defense.
And you mentioned the ball hawking aspect of him. In today's NFL, you have to have somebody. You don't need that thumper to come up in the run support as much anymore. If you're going to prioritize things, you want somebody who can cover some ground, can recognize patterns, who can make plays on the football, and that's what McKinney's going to give you. And I thought he was overlooked this season because LSU was the team of the SEC, because Alabama's defense wasn't as good as it normally is. They were good, they just weren't great. There was a lot of youth along the front seven, when you lost Dylan Moses. So he was one of those players who had to pick up the slack on that defense. I think he's an outstanding player.
Okay. Well, there you go. That is 11 through 20. We are not done yet. We're still going to keep rolling here. We're going to go on the clock next for 21 through 25. By the way, the Vikings, are they going to find the quarterback of their future? Let's see what Ryan has to say. All right, welcome back. We are on the clock here at CBS Sports HQ. We are going through our first official mock draft. We have done 1 through 20, so now we're doing 21 through 25. Ryan Wilson is here. He is the mastermind behind this particular mock draft. He's chuckling as I say that. Ryan, take us through these picks right here.
21 are the Eagles. They're taking C.J. Henderson. They obviously need help in the secondary. C.J. Henderson's a long physical cornerback out of Florida. Had a really good season, and he can make some plays down the field for you, which is obviously important. Number 22, Buffalo Bills going to take Laviska Shenault. We've talked for months, it seems like, that Josh Allen needs help at wide receiver. Shenault's a big wide receiver. He struggled with injuries this year. If he's healthy, he is going to be a game changer. We'll have to see how he runs at the combine. 23, talking about guys needing wide receivers. Henry Ruggs from Alabama, going to the Patriots to help out Tom Brady or whoever ends up being the quarterback there. I think that would make Tom Brady very happy. Because he's there. That's right. Another wide receiver goes at 24 to the Saints, Jalen Reagor, who's a small, shifty slot guy. He can return kicks. Played a TCU offense that was up and down, but I feel like if he plays in a consistent offense like New Orleans, he would shine early and often. And finally, number 25. And this is the first time Jacob Eason's been in the mock draft since back in October. I have him going to the Vikings. Kirk Cousins has 1 more year left on his deal. They're completely different type players. I know Brady in the past has compared him to Carson Palmer. I actually talked to Carson last week and mentioned that to him, and he seemed impressed, so thank you for that comp, Brady.
There's some similarities there. Look, I think Jacob Eason is further along as a passer than Herbert is. Both have strong arms, both can operate within an offense. The difference is Herbert has so much more experience coming from the college level than Eason does, really only 1 year starting. And I think that's a concern, is if you're drafting Jacob Eason in the first round, you're going to have to give him some time to develop. He might not play as a rookie. If he does play as a rookie, you might go through some lumps along the way, kind of like Dwayne Haskins this past year for the Washington Redskins. Now, on the bright side for Haskins, the more he played, the better he got. And so you started to see some of the progress from him, and maybe that's what you'll see from Eason. But, he's a guy, I think my concern is he's not the best athlete. I think in today's game, you've got to be able to buy time, extend plays, and move. And that is something that, when there's pressure, he's not the type of guy. He's going to have to get the football out quick. He's not the type of guy to run around and make a bunch of plays. So I'm not sure he necessarily goes this high in the draft given his lack of experience. You'd almost be replacing Kirk Cousins with a guy who's just got a bigger arm and less experience coming out of college.
The game that he squared off against Justin Herbert was really a fun game when Washington played Oregon. Those guys were going back and forth, and I thought there was a time in that game I'm like, man, Jacob Eason is shining bigger on this stage than Justin Herbert was there. And he's got some raw talent there. I remember going back to his freshman year when he was at Georgia, and he looked composed, looked like he could handle the moment. The one thing I worry about him is consistency. Just some foolish, some bad interceptions here and there. Never really eliminated those, and that's a concern for me. We were joking about Jameis Winston earlier in the show. That plagued him his last year at Florida State, and it's kind of it becomes who you are, and it's tough to shake those. I think Sam Darnold has to do the same thing. His last year at USC struggled with turnovers. He's struggling with the Jets. It's a process, and sometimes it's tough to get guys to eradicate those mistakes from their game. That'd be a concern for me with Jacob Eason, too.
He is almost a 3-to-1 guy, though, so it's not quite that bad.
Right.
But, there's definitely some times you need to improve on some of his play. But, look, they moved on from Bush Hampton. Maybe they thought part of that was the offense, too, that he was playing within. Maybe that's one of the reasons why he decided not to come back. I thought he could have used another year and really solidified himself as being a first-round guy. I was a bit surprised that he decided to leave and move on and to take that chance this year. I don't want to say with a crowded group, but I think if you have a good medical grade on Tua, he's going ahead of him. Obviously Joe Burrow's going ahead of him. And Herbert, I think because of the experience and what he was able to do and the way he capped off his season, he's probably going ahead, and maybe even Jordan Love. So,
yeah.
And I don't know how people are going to view Jake Fromm. Jake Fromm's a guy you're going to like the film. It's just, is he at his ceiling now? So there's a lot of question marks. I think Jacob Eason could be a guy that goes as high as potential first round, or maybe isn't even going to the third round. He could sway as much as anyone in this draft.
I think the really interesting thing here is what were you saying about Kirk Cousins going into last year, that 3-year fully guaranteed deal. Do the Vikings go into this thinking, hey, we're close with Cousins, we want to do as much as we can to maximize and maybe get one more run out of him before we hit free agency again? Or do they say, we don't want to be held over a barrel because we don't have a plan as far as the next quarterback in case it doesn't work out? So I think that could be very revealing for what Kirk Cousins' future holds if they do draft a quarterback here.
Let's talk about the Bills, the Patriots, and the Saints, because you have them, Ryan, all taking wide receivers. So out of these three guys, which one stands out the most for you?
Well, I'll say this. I've said this before. I don't think this many wide receivers will go in the first round, but this is only a first-round mock draft. This class is so deep at wide receiver, they will probably get pushed down for other players. But that said, I love Henry Ruggs to the Patriots. Their wide receiver situation was a nightmare, even after they traded that second-round pick from Osanu. He struggled to get open. That's not his game. Henry Ruggs gets open, and you will be hard-pressed to find someone that can cover him consistently down the field. So he stretches the field for Tom Brady in that offense. Josh McDaniels can do a lot of the things that he's done historically when they've had success. And then go out and sign a couple wide receivers and still have room for other. I mean, there was no wide receiver that could step up and help Brady, and we saw it week after week after Antonio Brown went down.
I tell you, we were talking about Tua before and the weapons that he had just been able to distribute to all this talent. This is just another reason why I think that's a little bit concerning, because we said before about Jerry Jeudy, who's going to be a top 10 pick, and we're looking at this as another first rounder he's been working with. And I think all of, you could go 4 deep, but these top 2 Alabama wide receivers, I love them both. Like everything they've laid down on tape shows you they're playmakers. They run exceptional routes. They're well taught. They're well coached up. So I think it's a home run for the Patriots.
Yeah, and then Waddle and Smith will eventually go on probably potential first-round picks. The other guy you talked about amongst the 3 wide receivers, aside from Ruggs, and you're right. I mean, he could take a top off of defense. Makes a lot of sense for what New England would need. Laviska Shenault. The Bills got to find themselves a true number 1. Shenault has a lot of those capabilities, but you touched on it, the 40 time. That's going to be the biggest question. For as big as he is, and he's a big boy now.
He's 220.
If he runs a 4.50, 4.51, he's still going to be good because he plays fast, and probably his best attribute is yards after contact, yards after the catch. Imagine a running back running with the football after he catches it. And then you also see this. They used him in a variety of ways when he's running on reverses, things of that nature. So Brian Daboll's creative. He's going to use all sorts of different ways of getting him the football.
All right, let's talk about the other wide receiver in this group, because Brady Quinn is crushing on a guy from TCU.
Jalen Reagor. Look, this guy may run a low 4.3. He's the type of player that can take a top off the defense. So I love putting him in the New Orleans Saints offense. I don't necessarily know if Drew Brees is going to have the arm strength at this point in time, if he comes back this year, to be able to throw to this guy deep downfield. But he's definitely going to take some pressure off of Michael Thomas, and he would be a nice or welcome compliment to Michael Thomas in the passing game. The other thing he provides is return ability. He's going to be able to help out in your return games, so maybe you don't have to necessarily take the ball quite as far down the field when you're looking to put up some points. But either way, you look at this year, banged up a little bit. That was part of it. Also had a true freshman quarterback throwing him the football. That's also going to play a little bit of factor maybe in a down year with some of his numbers.
I was going to say, too, the quarterbacks he's played with throughout his time there, not exactly stellar. So you get him in an opportunity where he's actually going to get catchable balls that he can run after the catch, and you get him in a system where you can utilize him a little bit more effectively. Could be a steal. All
right, there you go. So we made it through 25. Coming up next, we are going to take a look, of course, at the best of the best. How can they get better? The Chiefs, the 49ers. We'll find out. All right, welcome back. If it was the draft, it's been kind of a long night. We're at the very end. People are excited. Some people are sad. Taking a look at 26 through 32. Ryan Wilson is our guy. He created this lovely mock draft you can find on CBSSports.com. Ryan, take us through 26 to 32.
The Dolphins traded Larry Tunsil. They have to replace the offensive lineman. They start with Josh Jones out of Houston. Really good season, sort of under the radar. Had a really good Senior Bowl. Insanely athletic, and I think he sticks to the first round. The Seahawks need help along the edge, even though they drafted L.J. Collier last year. He hasn't really worked out. Jadeveon Clowney can't do it by himself. Your Gross Matos out of Penn State. He's young, he's raw, he's only going to get better. Kenneth Murray, your guy at Oklahoma, had a really good season. The Ravens need a linebacker. They gave him number 28. Stephon Diggs' brother, who plays cornerback at Alabama, former wide receiver, joins the Titans at that position. Logan Ryan looks like he's gone. Number 30, T. Higgins goes to the Packers, gives Aaron Rodgers a much-needed weapon. 31, Hunter Bryant, who played with Jacob Eason in Washington, reminds me of Evan Ingram, a move tight end. He goes to San Francisco to help out George Kittle in that offense and whoever ends up being quarterback there, joking about Jimmy G, of course. And finally, number 32, Kansas City, the Chiefs. They add another defensive player, even though their defense really balled out in the Super Bowl. A.J. Terrell out of Clemson played alongside Trevon Mullen, last year's second-round pick of the Raiders. He's a similar type player there.
Did anyone improve their draft stock as much as Josh Jones, the tackle out of Houston? Because he had a phenomenal senior week when you were there.
He was great.
Senior
In fact, I talked to a scout because I had heard that during parts of the season in 2019, Josh Jones' biggest issue was motivation, and he said if that was an issue, it was the previous year because Josh Jones wanted to come out, it sounds like, after the 2018 campaign. They said absolutely do not do that because he's going to be a day 3 pick or worse. Came back, worked hard. The athleticism is there, and I'm guessing that's what you're talking about, Brady, because he did, in fact, have a really good Senior Bowl week.
All right, let's talk about, I want to go to T. Higgins, though, going to Green Bay, helping out Davante Adams there a little bit. How do you guys like this pick?
I am a little bit torn. I think at this spot it's pretty good, but he's tall, he's physical, but against Ohio State, he did not have the best game. I worry about a tall, lanky receiver because in the NFL you're going to get challenged much more so than you did with Clemson's schedule throughout the ACC, where guys are going to come up and they're going to say, you know what? Good luck trying to get past me. I'm going to jam you at the line of scrimmage, and they're going to try to overpower him, get a little bit physical with him. So it's a skill set that he's going to have to learn how to shake jams, how to get open, how to get past that first level. And once he does that, guy's got great hands. He's long. He's got a long catch radius. I love all those things about him. Just mildly concerned about that. And good for Aaron Rodgers for finally, if they do take him, giving him a weapon to go alongside Davante Adams because they desperately need it.
I wonder if he's going to be able to be an immediate impact player. I do think he's got a ton of upside, a ton of potential. He's already showcased a lot of that at the college level, but to your point, hasn't been the toughest competition, even though they've been on the big stage. The only other concern I have, too, is he primarily lines up outside. You know, they usually try to isolate him. They'll stretch the field vertically or get in his hands quick and let him try to do something after the catch. I think this Packers offense already has that guy that they like to isolate in Davante Adams. Now it's about figuring out who else you can use to complement him that plays in the slot or can move around a little bit more. Maybe there's another wide receiver that fits that bill in this year's draft, but also could have a quicker impact too. I think the Packers have kind of already gone through some growing plans. Yes, with guys they drafted in later rounds, like the Quinn St. Brown, Valdez-Scantling, and the others that kind of fall in line, but this is one that I think it makes sense because it's a need. I don't know that this player goes at this spot. I do think he's going to run well at the Combine, though, and that will potentially put him in that first-round talent category. All
right, what about the 49ers, 31? They have George Kittle. They're going to pay George Kittle, and you have them all taking another tight end. Tell us why.
Yeah, he is a first-round talent. He struggled with drops at times during his career at Washington, but he is insanely athletic, and like I said, he reminds me a lot of Evan Ingram. And look, George Kittle is their primary weapon. Manny Sanders played okay once he was traded to San Francisco. Deebo Samuel really played well as a rookie, and he's going to be an integral part of what they do going forward. But we've seen teams have success when they have two tight ends, even if those two tight ends do two totally different things. And Bryant is a playmaker down the field, and I think he creates mismatch problems wherever he ends up lining up and running those routes.
I was going to give a really bad Aaron Hernandez joke right there, but I'll just skip it because there was a team that did have that when they had Gronk and Hernandez and the Patriots. Of course, we know how that worked out. But to your point, if you can put somebody on the other side of Kittle and put them in, a 12 personnel, it really can create some mismatches for you down the field. Because you can if you have a guy like Kittle, you can game plan somewhat, try to eliminate some of those. But if you have two guys you put on the field at the same time, good luck trying to stop them.
It definitely makes some sense. Although Kyle Shanahan figured he could kind of put anyone. He figures to put anyone in that spot, and they get production out of them. Now, Kittle's different. He's an outlier. He's the best tight end in the business. It more depends on what they do with Juszczyk. Juszczyk's kind of that hybrid fullback, but he also plays like a tight end role too. If they bring him back, if he's still part of this team next year, I don't necessarily know that they go that route. I would think offensive line, potentially look at some of the interior guys or a replacement to Joe Staley. Eventually, he's going to move on. He was in and out of the game this past year in the Super Bowl. That would be a potential spot depending on who's there on the offensive line. And then you also got to keep thinking about defense, potentially some spot in that secondary if you have to go back to a Super Bowl next year and try to match up with those Kansas City Chiefs.
Grant Delpit might make sense there.
Right, that's another spot, yeah.
Congratulations on your Kyle Juszczyk prop bet, by the way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. He picked him to score a touchdown, the first touchdown, correct?
It was the first one for the 49ers.
There for the
not
49ers.
the first one of the games. Mahomes had that one.
All right, anyway. Okay, so let's look overall. No, I'm sorry, we forgot the Chiefs. I'm sorry. You guys won the Super Bowl. So, Ryan, how are we making this team better?
There's not a lot they need to do. I mean, they just did win the Super Bowl, but the secondary was their concern for most of the season. They lost Juan Thornhill, their safety, their second-round pick, in December, and they didn't miss a beat. And the defense got better and better, I felt like, especially as they got through the playoffs. So I give them A.J. Terrell, the cornerback out of Clemson. He had a tough championship game, but everyone had a tough championship game. He's a physical guy. Again, and Brady would probably point this out, he plays in the ACC. He does not play in the SEC, so these are things that teams have to figure out. But I think he makes some sense adding depth and then potentially stepping into a starting role.
They still play tackle football in the ACC, just to remind you that. You want to be there. But I think you saw some of those weaknesses in the play that Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't connect with Emmanuel Sanders. They did get past the secondary. We were talking about the pregame show yesterday, but thinking maybe Garoppolo could have a good day because that was not one of their strengths on the outside. So maybe they try to bolster up that defense even more because it does look on the offensive side of the ball, things are pretty good. So maybe you continue to try to develop that defense.
If only he hit that deep shot to Emmanuel Sanders, he's over the over-under for passing yards in this game. Maybe
Yes.
It changed the outcome for the San Francisco 49ers. I'm with you. The weakest part of the Chiefs team, to be quite honest with you, is probably their cornerback play. And I think had you had an officiating group that was going to be a little bit more nitpicky, there's most likely more defensive holding calls in that particular game. But they let them play. I think the Chiefs were able to just do enough on the outside to limit Jimmy Garoppolo on the 49ers passing game. But there's no doubt they could use help at the cornerback spot. This would be a good spot for them to go to. I think once they get Thornhill back, they'll be even better looking at the group and how they played this year.
Can I ask one thing real quick?
Yeah.
Would you guys like to have at this position someone like J.K. Dobbins, or is that too much?
I don't know that you need it based on what Damian Williams has done. And I don't know that you necessarily are valuing it either. If when you look at
hanging around with Frisco too much, we're all under the influence.
It's true. I just think when you look at this year's draft, Dobbins could be a guy that it depends on how fast he runs his 40. And then where are you really valuing it if you're the Chiefs and you are trying to get over the top? Are you saying, yeah, we're gonna place that in the hands of our running back to be able to close out games? They've already showcased the ability to do that. I think a cornerback makes much more sense here.
And it's going to be one of the really interesting things to watch if they can create this dynasty or, get multiple championships is where do they choose to spend their money, especially when they have to give a lot of it to Patrick Mahomes. And running back to me, I know it's a draft and it's a rookie deal, but I'd rather use that pick with some other position.
Chris Veach this past year, did any move he make, did any of them not work?
Right.
It seemed like everything he did this year worked.
Yep.
Crushed it.
Okay, let's talk about, let's go down the line 3 years from now. Let's take a look at the quarterbacks there. You got guys like Joe Burrow, Tua, Justin Herbert, Jordan Love. Where are these guys 3 years from now? How do
We're
they
only
look?
going 3 years?
Only
That's not
3.
very
I
far.
know the number.
You got a 5-year deal. They're probably all still with the same team they're on.
Three to five
I feel
years.
the most confident in Burrow, which is really not going out on a limb. I would say as a whole, this class does not do a lot for me. As a whole. I don't think you're going to be looking at some great class or these are going to be guys that are Pro Bowlers. Outside of Burrow, I just don't know. Tua is the one kind of outlier for me who could be spectacular, but I'm just not very confident in the ability to stay healthy.
I think Joe Burrow seems like the layup, but again, and Brady talked about this earlier, 1 year production, why? We have to figure that out. Tua's injury history concerns me a lot. Justin Herbert, can he change his spots after doing what he's done for so many years? Can he magically be that guy who can make those touch passes, as Brady's talked about, after not doing it for so long? I'm going to go with Jordan Love. I feel like he has a lot of untapped potential. He played at Utah State, which isn't an upper-level competition, but I feel like it may be in another system with the right coaching staff. I mean, if he falls to, say, Sean Payton, that is like a home run in terms of his best chance at development at the next level.
The funny thing, the easy answer is Joe Burrow because of what he did this past year. But we talked about 2 years ago versus past year. What do you make of that? Tua's probably the one that has consistently over the course of his career the best film of anyone. When you look at his body of work, and I think when you look at his floor and you look at his ceiling, they're probably pretty close together. And I think his ceiling's pretty high. And so I would say Tua, however, you're concerned about the injury history and his status and what that means for him moving forward, and where he goes could largely depend on what kind of player he is, much like the rest of these guys. But the rest of them are all big question marks because of Love's past 2 years and Easom's lack of experience and all that. So it's hard to make a case for all these guys. And we don't even know if they're going to those teams, which could play a factor too. But it's funny, I think Tua, because he's not going to the worst team in the league, given the Cincinnati Bengals are just that, and that's a lot to overcome for Joe Burrow. Tua might be the one that ends up being the best spot because maybe he doesn't have to play early, and maybe it does take his time to get in there and finally go play with whatever team selects him.
And Brian Flores did an outstanding job with a roster where they were trying to lose all the games, and he actually maximized them. So I think he's going to a really healthy spot.
All right, Brady, Danny, this is for you. Ryan, you can take a little rest. Let's go back to a draft night. They announce your name, you get in a boat, and you got to take it up to the stage. How do you guys feel about that?
I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, which is the boating capital of the world. I am here for the boats. I'm here for Vegas. We're all going to be there, so it's going to be fun. I am here for the boat. I'm going to blow it out. Do it up as much as you can. I'm here for the boats.
What kind of boat are we talking about?
It looks like a pontoon boat.
If it's a
something
pontoon
weird.
boat, I'm all for it because, one, it's pretty steady. There's usually a lot of fun on pontoon boats. Okay? If you're on a pontoon boat, you're there to have a good time. If it's like a little dinghy we're talking about, I've got like a little single engine and I'm just kind of making my way up. I don't know. I better have a life vest or at least the ability to swim.
It's such a gamble, though.
It's a home run.
It's a
home run. It's a home run. It's going to be awesome.
Who's going to jump into the water? What if somebody can't swim? What if they're afraid of water? I have questions. There's so much.
How deep is the water?
What if it was a jet ski?
That would be cool. I think that would be so much fun.
Right? With fireworks.
Yeah, but someone dressed up as Kenny Powers.
Have you seen the shoes they're wearing, though? You can't ruin your shoes going in on a jet ski,
Well, you're probably not wearing shoes if you're on a jet ski. You're most like got flip-flops on at best.
All right. Our producer is saying goodbye. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Bomber, we're getting off air now. That is our first round of mock drafts. We're going to do a lot more.
Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.